And it was very bizarre, because suddenly we realized that, I can't remember whether it was some days later or some weeks later, but it was very bizarre to suddenly have this news of this enormous atrocity that had taken place, and it hadn't been reported immediately. Because normally that kind of thing would be reported immediately. And so I remember it was bizarre, but I don't remember exactly how long it was before the news trickled out. And certainly I don't think Human Rights Watch or Amnesty International heard about it before, you know, the news wires or anyone else.
It was weeks, was it, or days? Or?
I mean, just to comment on this question, in terms of official recognition of when the massacre happened, it was in 2004 when Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, in a meeting with Amnesty International delegates, acknowledged that there was some incident in a prison. In terms of the news trickling down, it was from families or from some survivors, but it took weeks, and very much tidbits and very few details until that official acknowledgement in 2004. So that's.
Okay, can we take these questions there now? I'll come back to you. I'll come to you. This gentleman here, and the gentleman at the back, and then I'll come. Yes, sir.
My question is an observation and a question directed to Mr. Igmati. Don't you think that after all these years, self-preservation is part of human nature, and the attempt to overthrow the Libyan regime is only going to result a similar kind of reaction from the government? Well, I mean, in the United States, there's all this abuse for human rights as a reaction to 9/11, and there's some torture to prisoners in Guantanamo Bay under the watchful eye of the British intelligence. Do we call for changing the British and the American system, or do we call for improving the system and actually stopping the abuses of human rights? So when we address this problem, do we address a problem of legality and human rights, or do we address a problem of a regime? Oh, we need to get rid of the Libyan regime. It's just a matter of fact, we can't.
Thank you, sir. The gentleman at the back, yes.
I'm James Green. I think it's, isn't it, hypocritical, as the last person has just said, for us to be criticising Libya for human rights abuses when the Americans are torturing people in Guantanamo Bay and
Abu Ghraib prison.
Abu Ghraib and the camp in Afghanistan, and when the Israelis have got half a dozen camps where they're in the Negev desert and Alaya, where they've been torturing people for decades, Palestinians who've done no harm to anybody. And I think it plays into the Zionist agenda, which after all started when the Libyans began to help train the PLO when nobody else was helping way back in the early 70s. And the Israeli jets were bringing down Libyan jets in the Gulf of Suez. And I was there in 1975 when one of these incidents happened. And I think it's, you must put into perspective, mustn't you, the fact that Colonel Gaddafi produced the Green Book, which is a far more democratic and a constitution than anything we've got here. It allows anybody to go to the Parliament and raise their issues there. I don't know what happens if you're under threat, but I've certainly been there and seen people raise questions criticising the regime, criticising planning policy and so on.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Actually, I'm very glad to hear about this attempts from Saladin Gaddafi, because it was confirmed a couple of weeks ago when I attended a meeting organized by Quilliam Foundation, where one of the architects of this agreement between Saladin and the Islamists have been, assured, and they have already a book and all of this. My question is, and again, I hear some kind of positive remarks about him. Do you think aligning Saladin aligned with the Islamists is a good way forward in protection of human rights based on Islam, or we should go further than that to assure of universality of human rights?
Okay, thank you, sir.
My name is Nazir Ahmed, not Lord Nazir Ahmed, he's sitting there. Thank you, sir, and thank you, Dr. Suaad, for inviting me here. I think I'll be failing in my primary duty if I do not commend the most appreciable effort being made by all the human rights organizations, including yours, under extremely difficult circumstances of power politics of different countries. And I think you know what I mean. My question is, isn't it time now for all the human rights organizations like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, to reinvigorate their efforts to get a universally and internationally agreed definition of what is terrorism and what is freedom fight and what is state terrorism? I can give you 3 current examples of such things happening. One, how do you define, in terms of terrorism or otherwise, when a country is invaded under self-interpreted excuses and reasons? That is Iraq. How do you visualize, and what is your view on the drone attacks of NATO forces on the civilian population in Pakistan? 3, what are your views about the state terrorism on the Kashmiri population in the occupied Kashmir? Now, who is doing all this and who is not raising voice against all these? Is it because India is a big power? Because America is in favor of India and not in favor of something else? Can you please tell me how you are going to get this internationally agreed definition of various terrorisms?
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Obviously, we want to focus on Libya. I'm a Kashmiri by origin, and I'd love to have a debate on Kashmir, but we don't want to lead this debate. But I take your point in relation to international.
I'm only referring to it to highlight the point that nobody is asking India that you have violated the human rights and you have violated the United Nations resolution of 1985.
I agree. I do this all the time. I'm chairman of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Kashmir. I'm going to ask Juma first to answer this gentleman's question. And then I think Oliver was asked a question, and then if you can be brief, because there are a lot of people who want to ask questions. Be brief, please, if I ask you.
Sure. I mean, to be honest with you, I find it a bit bizarre, this argument, this logic, that just because the British government and the American administration get involved in some sort of human rights violations within their countries, then we should not talk about or criticize human rights violations in Libya. This is an absurd logic. You know, Amnesty International publishes reports annually. They criticize probably every single country in the world, including the British government where Amnesty International headquarters is based, and including the American administration for still having the capital punishment. And I read Amnesty International reports. But it doesn't mean that you don't talk about, it's all relative. I mean, in this country, I'm not a fan of this government, but surely British citizens who campaign and demonstrate and try to bring down this government do not get arrested and tortured and then killed on mass numbers.
With all due respect, Mr. Juma, I do respect that, but the question was actually addressing things by their names. There's two sides for every story. If it's a legal battle or a political battle.
Can I just finish, please? What we are talking about in Libya, things are relative. When Oliver talked about human rights violations are everywhere in the region, that is true. The whole Middle East and Arab region is still embedded in tyranny and there is no democracy. But things are relevant. Things are relative. Things are relative. In Egypt, you have party politics, you have press, you have civil society, you have activists who are allowed to speak and organize and criticize. In Morocco as well, there's pluralism, there's party politics, there's independent press, there is criticism, there is a good margin. It's not ideal, but it's all relative. As the gentleman from Human Rights Watch said, probably Syria, Libya, and Tunisia are the worst culprits of human rights violations in the Arab region. That does not mean we like what's going on in other countries, but it's all relevant. What we are talking about Libya, we are not talking about somebody threatening the regime and trying to bring them down. We are talking about somebody engaged in a basic human right, which is enshrined in global human rights charters and in religion and in culture and everything, to speak freely, to think freely, and to criticize and to pursue purely civil means. That is not allowed. If I criticize Colonel Gaddafi in Libya or anybody else, they will be hanged, they will be killed. You can criticize Gordon Brown until the cows come home here, you're not being in prison. So it's all relative. What we are talking about in Libya is a culture of sheer oppression that has stifled any margin whatsoever or degree of freedom of thought or freedom of speech, and that has killed the potential of Libya and its people to develop despite the huge resources it had over the last 40 years.
Thank you very much.